a 6-year Army veteran, and I am a truck driver at this point in my life. And I have a story that I think needs everybody to know or be aware of. It has a lot of sharp teeth, and the teeth on this thing were white.
Imagine driving through the Michigan woods at night when something strange appears in your headlights. Glowing eyes piercing through the darkness, massive clawed footprints appearing out of nowhere, and a towering figure vanishing into the trees. Sounds impossible, right? But the stories keep coming. And among those claiming to have seen it is Joe Barger, whose chilling encounter only adds to the mystery. And now, to make things even more unsettling, there's been footage that has surfaced showing what could be the Michigan Dogman caught on trail cam. But is it real, or is it just another twisted myth? Let's explore the chilling mystery that has puzzled witnesses and sparked controversy. Because what if the Dogman isn't a myth at all?
I'm a 6-year Army veteran, and I am a truck driver at this point in my life. I'm 59, and I have a story that I think needs to get out and is important for everybody to know or be aware of.
Welcome back to the Cryptid Report. Joe's encounter was no ordinary brush with a wild animal. It was an event so surreal, so chilling, that it left him struggling to make sense of what he saw. The creature, he recalled, looked mad and determined to get to me as it silently loomed in front of his truck. Its eyes, glowing a fierce yellow, locked onto him with an unsettling intensity. Joe noticed its sneer, a cruel look on its face, but there were no growls or sounds. In that moment, he felt a deep sense of fear, but there was complete silence. What could this creature want? Why had it approached him without making a sound? Was it just a predator or something much darker hiding in the shadows? The unsettling part wasn't just its appearance. It was the eerie, unnatural stillness surrounding the encounter. Why did it seem to know he was there, staring through the windshield as if it had been watching for hours? And what was its intent, standing there so calmly? A strange and terrifying figure in the dead of night. As the seconds dragged on, Joe's heart raced. Why wasn't it moving or making any noise? Was it waiting for something? Or was this some kind of twisted game? And then, with an almost supernatural speed, it disappeared into the darkness, leaving Joe alone with 1,000 questions and an overwhelming sense of dread. Could this have been the Michigan Dogman? Was it really just an animal? Or was something far darker at play? The unanswered questions lingered in Joe's mind, haunting him long after the encounter ended. Was he the next victim of an ancient myth? Or had he just witnessed the truth behind one of Michigan's most chilling legends?
It has a lot of sharp teeth, and the teeth on this thing were white. It saw, like brilliant white, 3-inch long fangs, bottom and top, at least maybe 3.5 or so.
The Michigan Dogman, as terrifying as it is legendary, is no mere myth. Described as a bipedal beast, it stands upright like a man, but possesses the head and features of a large dog. With sharp white fangs that seem to glint in the dark and yellow eyes that glow with an unnatural light. The Dogman is said to stalk the forests of Michigan, striking fear into anyone unfortunate enough to cross its path. First spotted back in the 1800s, the Dogman's appearances follow a chilling pattern every decade, specifically in years ending in 7. While many dismiss these sightings as overactive imaginations, the people who've come face to face with the creature are never the same afterward, and Joe Barger is no exception. Joe was a practical man. A trucker by trade, he'd spent countless hours behind the wheel, hauling loads through the backwoods and vast forests of northern Michigan. His routine was simple, predictable. But on one fateful night in 2022, as he made his way through the thick, dark wilderness of the Manistee National Forest, everything changed. The quiet, mundane drive he'd taken many times before suddenly became a nightmarish experience that he couldn't shake. While hauling a massive 43,000-pound load of paper, something felt wrong. A sudden issue with the air system forced Joe to pull over and address the leak. It was late in the day, and the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the trees. As Joe slid under his truck to check the brakes, an uncomfortable feeling began to settle in. The air felt different, heavier somehow. Something wasn't right. Then, just as he was about to continue his work, a strange sound broke through the stillness, an unidentifiable vocalization that chilled him to the core. It wasn't like anything he'd ever heard before, but Joe, always the professional, tried to stay focused on his task. That's when he saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, something moving between the trees. But as he squinted into the fading light, the shadow took shape. A tall, dark figure, a figure that was unlike anything Joe had ever seen. It had the body of a man, but the head of a vicious-looking dog. Its eyes glowed an unnatural yellow, piercing through the shadows. Joe stood frozen, heart racing. For what felt like an eternity, the creature stared at him, unmoving. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the Dogman disappeared back into the darkness of the forest. What Joe didn't expect was that he wasn't the only one who would witness the creature. In his stunned silence, he managed to capture photographs of the mysterious being, a feat that would ultimately make his encounter one of the most compelling pieces of evidence tied to the Dogman legend. These images weren't blurry or vague, as many cryptid photos tend to be. No, these photos showed a figure, tall, shadowy, and unmistakably real, confirming Joe's terrifying encounter. Experts and skeptics alike have analyzed these images, and while the debate continues, one thing remains certain. Joe Barger's experience with the Michigan Dogman is some of the most convincing evidence to date that this creature might just be more than a myth. Confronting the Michigan Dogman, Joe was still trying to make sense of what had just happened. The air felt thick with tension as he finished the repair and checked the air pressure on his truck. For a moment, everything seemed normal again, and he hoped that maybe the strange feeling had just been a fluke. Must be a bear, he thought to himself, trying to rationalize the situation. After all, he was in bear country, right? But even as he climbed back into the cab, the unease never quite left him. As he continued down the two-lane road, the world around him seemed to settle into a quiet rhythm. The trees passed by in a blur, and for a moment Joe almost believed he could forget about the unsettling encounter. But that nagging feeling, the sense that something wasn't right, lingered in the back of his mind. Then, as he drove down a hill, his side mirrors revealed nothing but an empty road. He turned his attention to the passenger side mirror, and that's when he saw it. Something massive running alongside his truck. At first, Joe couldn't believe his eyes. The creature was so large, its head nearly the size of his truck window. It kept pace with the truck, moving at an astounding 20 to 25 miles per hour, as if it were no effort at all. But what truly shook Joe to the core was how the creature was running. It wasn't on four legs, like a bear or wolf. It was upright, moving on two legs, towering over the truck. The creature leaned in closer, as though it was trying to peer into the cab, its glowing yellow eyes locked onto Joe with a predatory intensity. The truck was 9 feet high, but that didn't seem to faze the creature. With terrifying ease, it reached up with clawed hands and scratched at the door handle. Its sheer size and strength were impossible to ignore. Joe's heart raced as the creature's wolf-like head came into full view, muscular, powerful, and unsettlingly intelligent. This was no bear, no animal Joe had ever seen before. It wasn't just the creature's size that unnerved him, but the way it moved, the way it stayed locked onto him, as if it knew exactly what it wanted. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. Everything around him felt surreal, as if Joe had stepped into a different world. Creatures like this weren't supposed to exist, yet here it was, running alongside him, uncomfortably close. Joe felt frozen, as though the creature's gaze had him paralyzed, unable to act. Eventually, the shock wore off and fear surged through him as he realized how close the creature was. He had to get away, fast. Without thinking, he slammed his foot on the gas, speeding up to put as much distance between himself and the creature as possible. The truck roared to life, but even as he sped away, the creature kept pace, its glowing eyes still watching him, tracking his every move. After what felt like an eternity, the creature finally disappeared into the shadows of the forest. But the feeling of dread didn't vanish with it. The memory of what he had just witnessed stayed with Joe, haunting him. He couldn't shake the image of that massive, wolf-like creature running alongside his truck, eyes filled with a knowing intelligence that seemed to say, "I'm here to get you, and there's nothing you can do about it." In that moment, Joe felt an overwhelming urge to protect himself. His eyes instinctively went to the handgun strapped to his waist, a .45 CT that he kept with him for emergencies. With trembling hands, he reached for it, fully aware that whatever this creature was, It wasn't a bear or anything else he could handle with just his fists. He needed to act fast. Without hesitation, Joe aimed and fired 2 shots at the Dogman. The creature went down instantly, sliding into the weeds at the side of the road. Joe believed one of his bullets had struck the creature through the eye, but he wasn't about to take any chances. His heart still pounding in his chest, he continued driving, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The beast was down, but was it really? Joe needed to know for sure. About a mile up the road, he found a wide enough area to turn around, and without a second thought, he headed back to the scene. He wasn't sure what he was going to find, but he had to confirm what had just happened. He had to make sure the creature was truly gone. What if it wasn't dead? What if there was more to this encounter than he realized? He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much darker. As he made the turn and headed back to where he'd seen the creature, Joe's mind raced. Was he really about to find the Dogman, or had he just imagined it all? The answers were waiting for him. But what he would discover next would change everything. Joe's heart pounded as he arrived back at the scene just minutes later, the weight of the encounter still heavy in his chest. But what he saw didn't make any sense. The creature was gone. The ground where the Dogman had fallen was disturbingly empty, leaving only the lingering impression of what had just happened. Instead, he noticed a Jeep parked near the spot. There were 2 people inside, seemingly unaware of the danger lurking in the area. Worried for their safety, Joe pulled over to warn them, but to his surprise, the couple appeared completely unfazed. They casually mentioned they had been watching 2 bears fighting nearby. Joe listened, nodding politely, but their words seemed odd to him. Bears? Could there have been more than one Dogman, or had he misinterpreted what he had seen? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He had just encountered something that defied every explanation, and the possibility of more creatures like it existing was an unsettling one. For weeks, Joe couldn't shake the memory of that terrifying moment. It became a constant weight on his mind. He described it as the most terrifying event of his life, more terrifying even than his experiences in combat. As time passed, the nightmares gradually faded, and Joe began to regain a sense of normalcy. But the encounter had left an indelible mark on him, and he realized that sharing his story was the only way to move forward. The experience had been too extraordinary, too horrifying to keep to himself. He felt a responsibility to let others know about what he had faced. It wasn't just a matter of releasing the burden. It was about ensuring that others understood the dangers that might lurk in the shadows. Opening up wasn't easy, but eventually Joe came to a place where he could talk about it. His mental and emotional state improved as he found support from the right people. Yet, once he decided to share his story publicly, things took a dark turn. The first step came when Joe decided to share his encounter with a well-known cryptid-focused podcast. He kept his identity anonymous, knowing that such a revelation could attract unwanted attention. But 3 months after the podcast aired, Joe found himself facing an encounter with authorities that shook him to his core. It all started when state police detained him at a scale house while he was on the road. Before long, federal agents arrived, and they weren't there for a routine check. Joe described them as intimidating and furious, their anger unmistakable. They accused him of killing one of their assets. At first, Joe was confused, but it quickly became clear that they were referring to the Dogman he had shot. The agents didn't hide their fury, telling Joe outright that he had interfered with something they considered their property. The words sent a wave of shock through him. The agents were making it clear that the Dogman wasn't just a creature. It was something the government had an interest in, something they wanted to keep under wraps. Joe speculated that they had tracked him down through his appearance on the podcast, even though he had remained anonymous. Still, it didn't explain the intensity of the reaction from the authorities. They confiscated his firearm and even froze his bank account temporarily. Joe was left shaken, silenced, and uncertain of what would come next. He believed that the government's interest in the Dogman went beyond mere curiosity. If controlled, he theorized, such a creature could become a powerful asset, possibly even a military tool. The thought of the government using the Dogman as a secret weapon unsettled him, but it made a strange sort of sense. What had started as a terrifying encounter in the woods had now spiraled into something much darker. For a time, Joe kept quiet, unwilling to risk further confrontations with the authorities. But eventually, he came to the conclusion that the public deserved to know what he had experienced, no matter the consequences. Despite the risks, he felt it was his duty to speak out. Many skeptics dismissed his account, labeling it a hoax or an attempt to gain attention. But Joe wasn't deterred. Interestingly, the Dogman wasn't a new legend. It had been part of Michigan folklore for generations. The first recorded sighting dated back to 1887 when lumberjacks in Wexford County described a 7-foot-tall, blue-eyed, canine-like creature that walked on 2 legs. Native American legends also spoke of similar creatures, beasts with the strength and speed to overpower anyone who dared to cross their path. Could it be that the Dogman had been around for much longer than anyone realized, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? The answers, as always, remain shrouded in mystery. The origins of the Dogman might go back even further than anyone realizes. Some believe its presence is tied to ancient Native American legends, with stories passed down through generations. The Odawa tribes, for instance, spoke of a skinwalker, an entity capable of transforming between human and beast, terrorizing villages along the Manistee River. This connection between the Dogman and shape-shifting creatures adds a mysterious layer to its already eerie reputation. Encounters with the Dogman in Michigan are often tied to the Manistee National Forest, an area frequently referred to as the Dogman's home. The dense woods have long been a source of spooky stories, with locals reporting sightings and strange noises in the area. In her 2019 book, I Know What I Saw, Wisconsin-based author and investigator Linda S. Godfrey delved into the Dogman's lore, exploring numerous creepy encounters. People describe the creature as moving incredibly fast, leaping from tree to tree, completely unfazed by the harsh, freezing weather. But what truly adds to the forest's mystery is its dark past. Godfrey compared the feeling in the forest to the haunted ground of Gettysburg, where visitors still claimed to see ghostly soldiers, long after the Civil War had ended. It seems as though certain places, steeped in bloodshed and sorrow, create an opening for the paranormal to manifest in ways that defy explanation. This theory about lingering energy ties into one witness account in which the eerie howls of what seemed to be hellhounds were heard echoing through the woods. Were they creatures like the Dogman, or something even darker? The legend grew stronger as time passed. 10 years after the incident that took place with the lumberjacks in 1897, another strange occurrence was reported near the town of Buckley. A farmer was found dead over his plow, and huge dog-like tracks were found surrounding his body. Many believed the Dogman had killed him, cementing the creature's terrifying place in local folklore. But it wasn't just these initial encounters that kept the Dogman legend alive. In the years that followed, the stories continued. A local widow, 10 years after the lumberjack incident, shared her terrifying experience of strange dogs gathering outside her home at night. Their eerie, banshee-like howls sent shivers down her spine. But it wasn't until 1917 that the Dogman legend took an even more disturbing turn. A local sheriff came across a bizarre and unsettling scene on a lonely dirt path. An abandoned wagon stood in the middle of the road, its driver nowhere to be found. But the truly horrifying part was what lay next to it: 2 dead horses. Their eyes were wide open, frozen in an expression of sheer terror. It seemed as though they had witnessed something so horrifying that their hearts simply couldn't take it. The sheriff, confused and alarmed, called in a veterinarian to inspect the animals. To everyone's surprise, the horses showed no visible wounds, no signs of illness, and no traces of poison. The veterinarian, left with no explanation, offered a chilling theory: sheer fear. As strange as these sightings were, they only deepened the mystery of the Michigan Dogman. Many of these encounters happened in isolated areas, often in the dead of night or in the depths of the forest, where the Dogman allegedly made its presence known. Witnesses spoke of the creature's terrifying speed and agility, describing it as leaping across roads or emerging from thick woods with shocking speed, scratching at homes or tents. The Dogman's sudden appearances, coupled with its eerie, unnatural howls, kept the legend alive and well in Michigan, with people continuing to question whether this beast was real or simply a myth that had gained a life of its own. However, as the reports continued to pile up, some skeptics began to question the credibility of these sightings. Joe Barger, one of the most famous witnesses, came under intense scrutiny. His chilling encounter with the Dogman, where he saw the creature's glowing yellow eyes and menacing sneer, left him terrified. but not everyone believed his story. Many dismissed him as someone simply trying to get attention, or as someone who had let his imagination run wild. There's no such thing as a dogman, or he's lying, some would claim. But why did so many people describe eerily similar creatures in such detailed, consistent ways across decades? Could they all have been mistaken, or was there more to the story? What if the Dogman sightings aren't just stories or hallucinations, but pieces of a larger puzzle that no one has been able to solve? Are the people of Michigan simply living in fear of an unknown creature, or is there something more sinister lurking out there, hidden in plain sight? The more we learn, the less we seem to know. If you're wondering where to find the Dogman, the first piece of advice would be simple: don't go looking for it. But if you're determined to try your luck, rural areas or places connected to the Department of Natural Resources, DNR, are the most promising. These regions have been home to a number of sightings, and the Dogman seems to be drawn to these isolated, wooded areas where it thrives in seclusion. Whether the creature was part of a larger cryptid world or something entirely unique, no one could say for sure. What remained certain was that the Dogman had become a part of Michigan's folklore, a chilling mystery that blurred the line between myth and reality. And even now, the eerie encounters continue to fuel the question: what is the Dogman? And is it still out there, waiting for its next encounter? The debate continues, as the line between fact and fiction gets blurrier with every new sighting. With glowing eyes, eerie silence, and mysterious creatures lurking in the woods, the question remains: what is really out there? Is the Michigan Dogman just a myth? Or has Joe Barger stumbled onto something far darker and more dangerous than anyone expected? Could this be the beginning of a long-hidden truth finally being revealed? The forest holds its secrets, but for how much longer? As the story continues to unfold, one thing's for sure: this is a mystery that won't be solved anytime soon. Drop your theories in the comments, and remember, stay alert. The woods may be hiding more than you think.